All right, let's talk about UVs. Okay, I've got Maya up just as a classic view. If I come up here in the upper right hand corner to the workspace, I can change it to UV editing. We'll do that. Now I've got this UV toolkit window up. You probably don't. It's because last time I opened it I had it up. You might have it up separate, or you might have it up attached, right? Remember how you can dock the windows when you're in Maya, right? This UV editor, if it comes out like this, you can just dock it. I'm going to wait till that goes up light blue, dock it there. And then if I go here into tools, I can open up the UV toolkit right here, right? And I can dock that right here. Now I like when I'm doing UVs to have all four of these windows open. The UV toolkit, the UV space, and the 3D space, and the outliner. Because when we're doing UVs, of course we need to see our results here, but quite often we'll be making our selections from 3D space. It can be a lot easier to make your selections of boundaries and things in 3D space. And it's nice to select objects quickly in the outliner. So I like to have all four of these windows up. You might have noticed that the UV toolkit looks a whole lot like the modeling toolkit. If we open that up, you can see you can choose what you're selecting up at the top row, and below that are your selection constraints, and below that are the tools for modifying and unwrapping your UVs. So these tools in this area are actually redundant with the tools that are listed here. Of course we can't see them all at this second. Let's get rid of this and open this up. You'll see that these across the top, these are the same tool set that you'll find here. It's just organized a lot better here. And this is new. This is the new menu. So see, for instance, you could go to create UVs and go to this menu, or you're going to get the exact same thing here. These are the same tools as these. UVs, of course, are where we flatten out the surface of our 3D model so that we can apply 2D textures to them. And we're going to go through the process in detail. But there are a lot of little buttons and dials in here, and if you want to know the nuances of each, then I would encourage you to go to here, this YouTube video. I found it to be a great reference, but you might find it a little bit tedious because the tools are well laid out and well defined even within the interface. But if you have a question about one or two in particular, this is a great place to go, because he basically just steps you through each one. And there are a lot of little hidden things in the tools, little nuances in how to use them that you could learn from this video. But rather than step you through each tool, I'm going to walk you through the process. The first thing to keep in mind when approaching UVs is to remember that UVs are just a means to an end. And the way you lay out your UVs is going to be different depending on what methods you're using for creating the texture. For instance, let's say you want to map letters or words in your texture. Well, you might want to do that in a program like Photoshop. And so then you want to make sure that your UVs are oriented horizontally, because that'll be the easiest way to apply letters, presumably. So let's just take a look first at some of the more conventional ways of unwrapping a model. Now, first of all, when you create primitives, they're going to come with the option to have their own UVs, right? So if you create, for instance, a cube, right, then you have this create UVs you can have checked. If you hit create, you can see there's a cube that we have there. You can see how the UVs are laid out. In this case, it's a little surprising that it's not more uniformly spread out. So after we've created it, we can go in here to unfold, right, and we'll click this to optimize it. See, and now all the faces are the same kind of aspect ratio as they are in the 3D space. Now you can see that that's kind of put an angle on that. So we'll use another tool where we'll select an edge, right, and we'll go down here to arrange and layout, and we'll click orient to edges. It's a good idea to have this oriented exactly vertically, because then you can more easily pack more geometry into this 0 to 1 space. This 0 to 1 space is where your texture lives. Now if you're creating textures for something that's going to be animated in advance, you don't have to worry so much about how your textures are being used. But if you're creating assets for something that's going to be rendered real time, like say for instance a game asset that you'll use in Unity 3D or Unreal or something, it takes time to read textures into the scene, and it takes memory to load more textures. And so if you want real-time performance, you want to be efficient with all that. They'll use texture map that is 256 pixels by 256 pixels, or 512 by 512, or 1024 by 1024, or 248 by 248, or some multiple like that, because those are efficient. But if you're creating an animation that's going to be rendered in Maya and can be rendered in advance, like say for instance a television series or something like that, you don't need to worry so much about your texture sizes or how many textures you're using. So when I was at Disney Consumer Products, one of my assignments was to convert the assets from the television series Doc McStuffins into assets that could be used in the Unity game engine. And so I started with the actual models and textures that were used for the TV series, and those consisted of not only a lot of geometry but thousands of texture maps. And I had to reduce those down into just like a dozen or so texture maps so that they could be efficiently read into Unity. So I had to reduce the amount of geometry and reduce the textures, and a lot more work went into reducing the textures than the geometry. Anyway, let's take a look at some other ways we could unwrap this. We could give it a spherical unwrap. Not that we'd want to do that for a square shape. Now, what Automatic has done is project from each of these locations. Let's do this from a sphere. So if we'll create polygon primitive sphere, let's say that. Now when we have a sphere come in, it has this sawtooth on the top and bottom. That's valuable because there's no way to conveniently create that sawtooth with the tools in your UV editor. You'd have to detach each of these edges individually. Just select each edge and attach it and then relax it. It would take a little bit of time to get this result. You could do it. It would just take a little time, so it's convenient when you first create it that it comes in looking this way. Okay, so our sphere, we could also remap it using Automatic. And here, this is not as intuitive as you might think. The theory here is that whatever direction, whatever plane it's pointing most closely toward, it will become a part of that projection, part of that island of UVs. So I would assume, honestly, that these would be more nearly the same shape, right? Like, why is this one so much smaller than this one? But such it is. So that's what Automatic will get you. And then we could do just planar, and that's just from one plane. Or there's cylindrical again, which is very similar to spherical. And in this case we have spherical, and you have this gizmo here that you can change these settings by, these sizes. Okay, or we could go normal based, and that's just picking a normal. In this case there's normals pointing in every direction, so it's kind of randomly choosing one. But if you had here, like say half of these faces were not here, okay, and then you said okay, normal based for this, normal based, then see now it's picking this direction because that's kind of right in the middle of all these normals. So these are primarily ways of projecting to create your UVs. Well, we're going to go through a process where we define the boundaries and then just relax it, and that will probably go the quickest or will be the most suited to getting good results. on our robot character. Okay, and so one way we could do that is we could say, all right, we've selected these edges, and then we'll go over here to cut and sew, and we'll cut those. Okay, so now there's a boundary across there. You can tell that's a boundary because it's highlight thicker, right? And we've got this button pressed here. Having this button pressed will highlight the boundaries of the edges. So now that we've got that, we'll select everything. Let's select, I'm right clicking in the UV editor, and let's see, hit Q to drop that tool. I'm going to select these shells right there. Okay, and I'm going to hit optimize, and now look, it's optimized each shell, or sort of relaxed it now with that new cut. Now that's kind of a slow way to do that. The quickest way to do that is with the bonus tools. So if we go up here, we can see bonus tools, UV editing, auto unwrap UV tools. Okay, and that brings up this menu. Now all this is the tools that we would ordinarily use here, just kind of all in one place. It's just a quicker way to go through the process, because the tools are kind of all brought together in one place. Okay, they're not any new tools in here, it's just they're listed in a convenient way. So if I select the object P sphere, okay, and I'm going to set this now, set edge color to red. We could create this time a shader. We'll put on a checker shader so we could see our results. Yeah, we're going to use Unfold 3D is what you should use by default. It's a little bit buggy, so sometimes I have to use the legacy unfold, but let's do that. We'll enter tool. Now, this 3D space should have more menus, and the reason it's not shown up is because I need to pull that out of the way so we can see them. But now it's waiting for us to define where our boundaries are going to be, right? So if I click here, like let's say I want those to be the boundaries, then I can say, okay, add those as borders. And now they've been added because you can see they've gone bold, they're thicker. Okay, and if you might say, oh well, I didn't want this to be a border, so maybe I'll just select that and I'll say remove that one. See, now the border stops there. Let's see what that does. So now I'll just say continue. Okay, and if we look in the UV space, we can see that that's now been relaxed in the UV space, and you can see too it's applied that texture, that checkered texture. So now here, if we hit done, if we hit 6, we can see that texture applied in the 3D space. So this little menu from the bonus tools is just convenient that way. When you have your object active, when you enter the tool, hit enter, it's waiting for you to select edges, select them, say okay, use those as boundaries, and then say next, and then watch it sort of cut it and unwrap it and fit it in the UV space and apply the texture or whatever else you've added. Just does all those things in one go, and then just say close. So it's a useful tool to get through it quicker, and we'll be using that a lot to unwrap our robot. It should go pretty quick. I'll admit it might get a little bit tedious because there's a few parts to unwrap, but I think the repetition will kind of help you get through the tools, and it will become, you learn a lot through repetition. A lot of people tend not to like UVs or creating UVs. It seems a little bit tedious and dull, but I kind of like creating UVs. It's kind of one of those critical jobs. I mean, quite often you need UVs, and that's kind of something you'll end up having to do a lot, I'm sure. Unfortunately, there are ways of getting around UVs. There's the PTEX standard that was developed at Disney. But I think for the vast majority of the time, UVs are going to be an essential part of your process in Maya. And so we will devote some serious time to them in the next videos.